Thank you all for being here today for our webinar on communicating with internal audiences. I am Melissa Inanj, Public Relations Specialist at Florida Municipal Power Agency and Vice President of Media Relations at FPRA Orlando. Thanks to those of you who joined our media panel last week, and thank you everyone who's joining us for the first time today. I'd like to also welcome Orlando chapter of PRSA who's partnering with us for the media mashup events. Thank you all for being here. We'd like to take this time again to remind everyone that our chapters support diversity and inclusion and will continue to create opportunities to do so. As some of you may have heard before, the proceeds raised through this event, all the media mashup events are going to go to New Image Youth Center, a youth organization that supports students K through 12. So thank you all for supporting us, supporting our programs, and donating. Now I'd like to turn it over to Rich Donnelly, APR, who's the president of PRSA Orlando, to say a few words before we kick off the program.
All right, thank you, and good morning to everyone. As Melissa said, I'm Rich Donnelly, president of the PRSA Orlando chapter, and we certainly appreciate our continued partnership with FPRA. On behalf of the chapter and our program co-chairs, Heather Wilson, Kimberly Devitt, we certainly want to thank our presenter and our participants in today's program. We certainly want to make sure everyone's staying healthy and safe as well. And as Melissa said too, with the proceeds of this from New Image Youth Center in Orlando, I know they're excited about the donation, but also they are going to plan to send a wish list of needs that we can share with the membership as well. So one last item, mark your calendars for July 16th. 8:30 a.m. for a virtual program with the Orlando Economic Partnership. That's going to be Laureen Martinez, APR, and she's going to talk about the partnership's BRACE initiative, and that's helping small and medium-sized businesses in Central Florida. That's coming up, again, July 16th, 8:30 a.m. You can look at prsaorlando.org and follow our social media channels for more information on that. Hope you enjoyed today's program, and back to you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Rich. Before I introduce our presenter today, I wanted to share with you guys a couple of housekeeping items. We have an hour allocated for this webinar. Unfortunately, we're going to have to have 45 minutes due to some technical difficulties we've experienced, but we just wanted to let you know that you can ask using the chat function. You can ask questions using the chat function down below, or you can raise your hand to be unmuted to ask questions. We would appreciate if you can keep your mics muted to avoid any background noise. And those of you who can't join us or want to rewatch the webinar later, we just wanted to let you know this webinar is being recorded and will be available to be viewed after. To kick us off, as we all know, the trust and commitment of our employees can make or break an organization. And this is especially during a crisis like COVID-19 or any time at our organizations. And transparent communication along with policies and has never been important than it is today. And we're pleased to welcome Stacey Smith, APR, fellow PRSA, senior counsel and partner at Jackson & Wagner, who will share with us some insight on the psychological barriers that we need to overcome as communicators in order for information to be heard, acted upon, and accepted. Stacey has helped many clients with her counseling expertise in crisis planning, problem solving, developing public relations and marketing plans, and she has expertise in research, specifically problem analysis and methodology design. She got her degree from University of Tennessee in communications and received a master's degree in management specializing in organization behavior from Antioch, New England Graduate School. And she has also served as an instructor in public relations at the University of New Hampshire, New England College, so many great things, and Antioch, New England Graduate School. With that, I would like to turn it over to Stacey to get us started on this great presentation.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. Good morning, all. It's nice to be with you. I wish I was with you in person. That would be more fun, but it's good to be here this way as well. I'm talking to you today about communicating internally. And as Melissa said, it is probably the most important stakeholder group you have to communicate with at this point in time. Actually, they're probably the most important group to communicate with at any point in time. But when things are chaotic in our world, it's very important to even ramp that up further. I'll start with, we started this year quietly, and then we started in with COVID. I'm sure we all thought this was the major crisis and we'll deal with this all year long, which we are. And who knew that right after that, we would have a stock market that tumbled quickly, which caused greater chaos. And then following that, we ended up with what's going on today with the systematic killings of our Black colleagues and people, and the Black Lives Matter coming out strongly. And so we have a lot going on our plate, which is distracting our employee base, which is causing them a lot of angst and issues that we really need to be sensitive to. And the question is, what's next? We're always wondering what's next. You're in Florida. Is a hurricane next? They're saying this is the worst hurricane season that they're anticipating for a long time. So that's something to think about. So we not only think about the things that are going on now in people's lives, but we want to think about the things that may be coming, that anxiety about that going on as well. Not to make light of this, but with all of this going on, who knows what's next? Now, this is where I miss the in-person part because some of you might chuckle. So, and I can't hear it, but I'll chuckle in your place. So what's next? The Stay Puft Man, some of you remember. So let's talk about the most important thing that we can do is really put ourselves in the shoes, in the mindset of those that we're communicating with. And that's whether we're communicating internally with our internal audiences or to our external stakeholders. I'm going to run through a couple of slides real quick with some data on where people's minds are at the moment. This is a conglomeration of data that's been shared. I'm a member of the American Association of Public Opinion Researchers, and they have been wonderfully gathering all this data together and sharing it through that organization to give us some of this underlying sense of what's going on so we don't have to be running out and picking a lot of it up ourselves. 60% of the population feel restrictions have been lifted too quickly. You've got an almost 60% believing that it's more important to control the spread, even if it hurts the economy. Another almost 60% said it's just too early to go out to the stores. You've got 9 types of public venues believe that should be open now with some rules. So they don't want to go out, but they think that some things should be open. You've got a large percentage of your Hispanic population, your Black population, feeling that they're really worried about somebody in their family getting the virus. These are all things that not only are the general public worried about, but then you have to think about whether your employee base are thinking about these things. You've got 64% saying they avoid going to public places. Returning to a normal life, you've got almost 30% think there's a large risk. The mask wearing, which has become almost a symbolic issue in many places, 90% claim they wear it outside the home. And if you walk around New England, New Hampshire, I'd say that that's pretty close. What is it where you are is another question. Depending on where you are, it could be different. And you've got a lot of registered voters who are wearing the mask all the time, who are supporting one particular political party, and those who aren't are supporting another political party, which can cause a divide. So if this is the general mindset of the general population, the question that I would ask you, and you should be asking yourself, is where are the employees' mindset on this? Where are they thinking on all of these subjects? And my question to you is, and what I want to discuss with you is why that matters. Why do we need to know how they're communicating, what they're thinking? Many of you have met the behavioral model before. I don't want to go into it in depth, particularly given our time, but I really want to talk about the one with the arrow, which is latent readiness. We as humans don't typically just become aware of something and act on it very quickly. One place that does tend to happen is in a grocery store when you're in the checkout line and you're hungry and there's the candy. That point of purchase stuff is a great awareness to ultimate behavior kind of decision. But typically what happens is people take in information, they take in feelings, they take in their in experiences, and it lies within them up to a time when something happens. The next box would be the triggering event to cause them to behave on it. Within this box of latent readiness, there's all of this stuff built up, both those things that are the psychological issues that have happened, sociological things that go on, both positive and negative push-pull within us. And that's what we really need to be understanding of our employee base and where they are and what are those things that they're bringing to the table to begin with when we have a crisis of what's going on with COVID coming in, and what that trigger of a pandemic like that will cause them to behave in one way or another. We need to understand this not just for this point in time, but all our points in time, to know what lenses they're looking through our communication and our actions with at all times. The problem we're experiencing now, and I always share Maslow's hierarchy because it's so important, is that if we understand latent readiness, we understand the psychological and the sociological background to why people are behaving the way they are and what's driven them to this point in time, typically people are away from the physiological and the safety needs. They move up the ladder. But in times of crisis like we have now, particularly with a pandemic, that tends to drop. People tend to go back into the lower levels of Maslow and hunker down. You probably saw that a lot in the first month of COVID, the first month of when people were locked within their house with all the sundry people that they have to be with, really worrying about, am I going to be paid? How am I going to get my health care if I have to go on unemployment? Is my organization taking care of me? All those physiological and safety needs really pounced up. Right now, as we get down the line, and I think psychologically the reason people are pushing for more opening besides the economic is that people really miss this social piece of what it is that we do, and that we need that connection with people outside the four walls in which we're living. So it's slowly creeping up, but we really need to remember that psychologically people have pulled back and pulled in. So when we're communicating with them, when we're making decisions about actions we're taking, symbolic actions as well as real actions, how are they going to look through these lenses? So your employee mindset, you really want to think about what their trust levels were before the virus and all this came through. Did they trust your management team? Did they believe what they were saying, that they had their best interests at heart? If that was lower before this happened, you know that you've got a problem getting them to trust what's coming out now. If trust levels were higher, that's probably something that can be reinforced. If they were lower, by being more transparent now, by being more open, by communicating more frequently and more effectively, you might actually be able to build up some trust levels. Where are they on risk aversion in general? Do you think your employee base are risk takers and that they're more apt to be comfortable coming back to work, going back into the workplace, doing what needs to be done? Or are they risk adverse? Are they working in an organization that really likes, what we do every day, and it's the same thing and nothing changes too much? So risk is a real issue in how you talk to them and how the expectations you have of their behavior going forward. Who are their influencers and their opinion leaders? Really key within the organization and externally. So maybe that can be a conduit to helping them understand what's going on. I've talked about affinities and barriers. These are things that help them. Affinities are things that are positive, that will bring them along into it. And what are the structural barriers? I mean, perhaps they have been working at home, but they have only their computer and they've got 5 people in the house, some who are kids, and how does that work? So you can start to have to think about what some of these push and pulls are. And what else might you need to know, given your particular business, your particular industry, of what's going on for them? We really need to do some thinking about that. And we need to be asking them. That is really important in this point in time, that we're listening to our employees, we're asking them what they need and what they're thinking. I have an example a little bit later on from an organization, an entertainment organization, not in the Orlando area, but they have been doing research with their employees every 2 weeks, sending out a survey, asking them how they're feeling, what do they need, what are their perceptions about things. So listening and just letting them be able to express where they are gives us as communicators the data that we need to communicate back to them effectively. And it also gives them that catharsis that somebody is listening to them. So these are just some of the things that you need to think about. Again, your employees may be particularly unique issues that you need to think about. The Institute for Public Relations, and if you don't know the Institute, I highly recommend them. They do a lot of research in our field. Their website's wonderful. They've got great data on there, but they just did this poll in May about employees in general, which I thought would be very helpful. Most employees want to phase out of the open office concept. So if you have open office when they come to work, that is not going to be something that they're going to be comfortable with. And you need to start thinking about that, particularly if you can't change that. How do you work that? Do you stagger people coming in? How are you going to structure that? 83% don't think their employers should require the employees to come back to the office. I was just talking to somebody who, she's in a small office of 70 people, and they've all been going in because they're essential workers. And she's in marketing actually, and she's like, well, I could work from home, but I'm part of senior management and I needed to set the example. So where is your senior management on this? Are we going to ask our employees to be there, but they're not going to be there? It's a question. 81% think they should be able to work from home until they're comfortable returning. Well, that's a question for leadership. How long do we go on with this? And what decisions do we make about when we actually require people to come back in? 74% expect the workplace to supply certain protections, hand sanitizers, masks, all of that stuff. And 72% they should be entitled to paid sick leave, while 67% said they should receive payment for being tested for COVID. So these are just some of the data points that are floating out there in the general employee population. You might want to think about asking your employees about some of these things as well. When we're thinking about their behavior going forward, and I talked about opinion leaders and their influencers, some people will go with the herd mentality. Well, if everybody's going out, if everybody in my office is going to be there, Susie's going to be there, I'm going to go in. But some will not. Some will hold back. I don't have it in this presentation, but we talk about innovators and laggards and where people are, and understanding your employee base on that score, who are out in front, who are more apt to be risk takers and be able to come back in, do what they need to get done faster, and maybe set the parameters and let it know that it's okay, can be the ones that you might call on first. Again, thinking about that. I'm just going to do a time check. We're good. Some things you make sure you must have for your employee base. You need to make sure all your policies are in place and they're clearly stated, and I'm sure you guys have got those covered. Signage, reminding people on the way in, the way out, what they need to do to stay safe, to wash up, to make sure that they're taking precautions in all the areas where people are apt to socially congregate. Having Q&As for them so that there are question and answers that they can go to if they need, or if somebody asks a question of them. A hotline, or at least a direction on who do you ask for what, reminding them. Again, when people are in more chaotic situations, we tend to clutch a little bit and not know what to do. So always reminding them helps to relieve anxiety and help people readjust better. And probably one of the most important things that you can do, and you could urge your leadership to support, is supervisory and managerial training on things like helping people understand, recognize anxiety levels, talk people off walls, deal with irate customers if they're public facing. I have a video here. In this instance of time, I won't share it. We'll share the video, the PowerPoint, and you can do it. Some of you may have seen it. It's the supermarket where the lady comes and wants to come in without wearing a mask. And the manager was absolutely beautifully trained in this. You could see it. We need to make sure our supervisors and the managers are absolutely trained, and not trained once, not a once and done kind of thing, but that they are they're getting constant support, constant training, constant communication about what to do, how to do it, and pats on the back for doing that. That's really important because it's not going to be easy. So make sure you have that kind of stuff in terms of on the plate and in the workplace. We always want to speak with one clear voice, and I'm talking speak in quotes because it's not just always words. We want our messages consistent across our stakeholders. We don't want to be in an educational institution and say one thing to our faculty and staff and something else to our parents. Because believe you me, those things will be seen by everybody, and that's the first place trust can erode if I see mixed messages. So make sure you have consistency there. Make sure your core values are run through every communication that you have, reminding people about what you feel is important and keeping that in front of them. And go beyond your words to actions. Everything is remember, symbolic communication is so much stronger and more important than what we say. It's what we do. So let's talk about some actions. And some of these are from organizations that we've worked with and I've talked to, things that they're doing. Spread the responsibility. Don't make it just the CEO's responsibility to talk to employees, but make sure all senior management is involved. We always, hear the good stuff. We might hear the good stuff from the HR people or from the CEO, but then, the legal people get involved or the financial people get involved and say, we want to, so CEO saying we want you to be healthy and take care of you and, make sure everything's good. So we're going to supply everything. And then the financial people come along and say, well, we can't afford masks. We can't afford to put that. They need to bring that in themselves. Make sure that's speaking with one clear voice. Spread the responsibility for that communication so everybody's talking about it and supporting what you're trying to accomplish. Use specialized channels with support ideas. Organization was helping people who are at home with new ideas about what to do. So it's not just about, here's how to get your work done, but also here's some things you can do with your children. Here are ways to reduce stress. You could share employee packages. An organization was sending little gift baskets to employees' houses with the face masks and the sanitizers. It's a symbolic communication that we care. We're there for you. We want you to have these things so you stay safe, so you can come back and do the work that needs to get done. I already talked about the feedback, asking for information, feedback, both formally and informally. I've talked about training. And this is a big issue that a lot of organizations are struggling with, and that's hazard pay for those people who have had to be in the office anyway. my kids are both out in the workplace and they're both essential employees. And as my son doesn't make that much money, he's like, gee, I do better staying home than I would going into the office. And I'm taking the risk and I'm having to travel and be in the public to do this. Our employees are thinking about that. That reflects back on our organizations. Do they really care about us? They want us there doing what they need, but are they taking care of us? So it's something to consider. Not all organizations can do it or supply it, but actually even mentioning it makes a difference, even if you can't do it. However, when words matter, you want to be sure you're using empathetic words. You want to keep it simple. You want to make it very personal. And you always want to have something in there that gives them a call to action about what it is. Just talking and not about stuff without a point of reference about what they can do about it makes people feel very helpless. So we want to make sure that we're talking directly to them. We want to keep it simple. And when I talk about simplicity, and this should be communication all the time, shorter sentences, not, 4-syllable words, short paragraphs, break things up, and giving that empathy with that call to action. So when words matter, you want to use them. So let's look at some examples in some categories. There are, I think, 6 categories of types of messaging you want to think about. When you're talking to your employees, you want to always acknowledge the challenges that are out there. So this is from an entertainment company. This is the one I was talking about that was doing the research. So they were talking about, you provided 789 individual comments about what would be most helpful for their challenges that they've heard their employees are dealing with. It's communication, cost, flexibility. So always acknowledge the challenges that they are facing. Not so much, you can acknowledge the challenges the organization is the organization is facing, but you also want to acknowledge the challenges that the employee is facing. You want to remind of core values. I've already talked about this. This is a nice example. Unwavering in our commitment to provide you with support, resources, and the flexibility you need. You want to provide guidance and rationale. Too often in a lot of communication that we do, we don't give the rationale for why the decision has been made that's been put on the table. And this is a very nice one. I really like the graphics in this one. My mask protects you, your mask protects me. We're doing it to protect the people around us. So always provide guidance and a rationale for why we're doing it. I can do whatever you need as long as I understand why. You want to report on successes where we've made the transition. You're supporting each other. You want to give that pat on the back. We're not in close proximity with each other anymore, so we can't do the physical pat on the back anymore. We can't give that hug or whatever it is that some people really need. So we have to actually up our talking about successes and patting people on the back. We want to set expectations about the future. So in many cases, we want to lower expectations, because if we raise them too high and then we don't meet them, that is a recipe for disaster. So dampening down expectations without making everybody depressed is a really good idea. We're now in the process of reviewing the many measures we put in place to determine what should be eased. They're not saying when or whatever, we're looking at it. A good thing is to give a timetable. We'll be back to you in a couple of weeks with our next steps and what's going on. And finally, recognize and thank. That comes with acknowledging success. So here's for an educational institution. We're all carrying a very heavy workload. We recognize that. I thank you in advance for all you do. So we always want to recognize and thank. So just recapping, we acknowledge the challenges. We remind of the core values. We have guidance and rationale for decisions. We report on successes, set expectations for the future, recognize and thank, and we cheerlead. We emphasize the strengths. I think I did not have an example in there, but we want to make sure that we're talking about what they're doing right. all the time. I thought I saw a hand up. Is there a question that we should deal with now, Melissa, or do you want to wait till I'm done?
I see the hand lowered, Stacey. I think we can keep going and we'll answer them during our Q&A section.
Okay. I know this presentation is about COVID, but given the Black Lives Matter, the racism, the anti-racism, all this stuff that's going on, I've added a few slides on talking about that as well, because in many ways, we're all like, oh, how do I talk about COVID? How do I talk about the pandemic? How do I make employees feel better? That almost feels like child's play now compared to how people are talking about how do we talk to employees about this subject. We're counseling a school the other day, and the head of the school, it's a private school, and she had made the decision in her communication to all the stakeholder groups, internally and externally, and not to say in the communication Black Lives Matter, because she was balancing a board that had some other viewpoints, not totally opposite, but just a little sensitivity to it. And by not doing it, she created a firestorm for the organization. And we had a lot of conversation about how she could fix this. And she did a very good job ultimately in just saying flat out, I screwed up. This was wrong and I should have gone there, and I didn't. And it is really done a lot for her and the organization to start down that path by just admitting that it's hard to talk about and we will make missteps on this. Some data points of the mindset on racism right now, and this was May 31st through June 1st, so this is very recent. 47% said the CEO is the most appropriate person to deliver these messages. 49% said companies should emphasize the death of George Floyd in their response. No one in this study had received a positive review in how they were addressing the protests and the issues in general. And it goes to show you this is a very, very difficult subject to talk about for many organizations. 11% of respondents reported feeling that the media, the police, the governors were doing an excellent job. That's 11%. That's nothing. And more than half of respondents said the worst is coming. And given what we keep seeing and keeps happening, that is going to be expected until we get a handle on all of this. So I want to emphasize that you are now dealing with an employee base that is dealing both with the subject of racism and feeling safe in their lives and in many ways. And we need to think about that as well. So some examples of language that has been used, this comes from a public university. The death of George Floyd is yet another tragic reminder of the bias and the violence that exists in our society. It's flat out there. Here's a private school. We strive to live with our values of kindness, integrity, perseverance, and respect. This is working through the core values. Providing guidance and rationale. It's important that employees feel safe and comfortable. So we have employee assistance programs. If you're hurting, please know you're not alone. So here's guidance on what to do if you're struggling. This comes from a healthcare company and one from a pharmaceutical manufacturer. Another about setting expectations about the future. The task force will review our current position and we'll make recommendations for what we're doing in forms of diversity going forward. Again, all of these are things that we want to work through our communication and we want to have across the board, and we want to be consistent and speak with one clear voice about. So the interesting thing was, back on that school example, they had done a lot to try and pull things back, and they set up a task force to study all this and come up with recommendations. And they were very proud of themselves, and they wanted thinking about going out to the media. Should we talk to the media about what we're doing? And I said, we said to them, it would be fine, but you're not doing anything yet. Have a task force. Wait till you are actually doing things, because right now the mindset of our employee base and all our stakeholders is, talk to me when you are made actual concrete change. Don't talk to me that you're thinking about something or you're planning or you're organizing. Talk to me what you're actually going to do differently. So just a mindset on the racism thing. I really wanted to make sure that we talked about that, given everything. Finally, in times of crisis, it's really, our council is usually not to introduce new vehicles to communicate. Again, people clutch and they go back to where they're comfortable. And so unless you don't have an urgent alert method in place for communicating with all your stakeholder groups, including your employees, I would introduce that. But if you don't have it, but if you do, stick with where people are getting their information usually, and make sure you're filling those channels so that they know where their comfort level lies, and they know where they're going to get what they need. I think we're good. We got 10 minutes to go. I wanted to be a little shorter, but let's talk. I'll let Melissa handle some questions, and I'll see if I can answer them for you.
Thank you so much, Stacey. We already got a great question from our audience, from Casey Escobar. She's asking, I've seen a few organizations use town halls as a listening tool to gauge employee mindsets on tough issues. What are your thoughts on this tool, and do you have any tips on how to make town halls more effective?
Town halls are great tools, and they're great for a certain type of employee. Somebody who is comfortable standing up in front of a lot of people and asking a question. Somebody who can take a little back and forth with whoever's answering. There's not a lot of people. I would say your innovators, your early adopters might be in that group, and they will ask questions that others are probably thinking. But there's also people who will never feel comfortable in that venue. So either structuring in such a way that people can write down a question and pass it in, or give them other small group opportunities. So they might come from a town hall like this and then go into a smaller with their own supervisor and 3 or 4 of their coworkers to have a conversation where they might feel more comfortable. Always think about the balance. Are you able to give everybody an opportunity? And so not do town halls, but make sure you have other venues for those who are not comfortable in that arena.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have another question. It is, how many total responses were a part of the survey that you shared with us earlier?
Now I shared number of surveys, so I'm not sure which one you're talking about. If you drop me an email and to ask me which one you're referring to, or I can actually send you, if it's from the APOR group of data, I will send that to you. The Institute for Public Relations stuff, you can find that on their website. It's front and center there. So, but again, drop me an email and I'll send you the link to all of that and let you know. But yes, that is a marvelous, marvelous question. And I applaud you for asking it, because understanding how the research is done, what the sample size is, what the margin of error is, how it was asked are all key when you're doing research. We do a lot of research and so many people don't think about, they just look at a number and say, oh, well, numbers can be really tricky. So yay for whoever asked that question.
And we got a question earlier and I went ahead and answered for us. Everybody was very excited to see the presentation slides, and I've shared with them. We're happy to share the slides and the recording with them, since we had some technical difficulties and they probably want to refresh their minds on everything they've learned today.
Absolutely.
And there's one more question. the question is, do you think it's challenging to maintain your company culture while working remotely?
It's always challenging to maintain your company's culture, whether you're remote or not. It is. It's obviously going to be more difficult. Your employees who have been part of your organization longer are going to be able to hang on to that. So you might try things like pairing employees up. If you have somebody who's fairly new, 6 months, a year, give them a mentor or a buddy who's been there for 30 years and let them connect in some small group way. Maybe that person can mentor 2 or 3 people on a call, a Zoom call every couple of weeks, to keep that culture going and create those. We have such issues in our organization with silos. Everybody's nodding. Oh yes, I know, silos, silos, silos. This is a really interesting opportunity to break down some of those silos. And so say, Joe, you've been here 30 years. We've got some people over in customer service who are new and we want to keep them. Would you Zoom with them every so often and kind of keep that culture? Tell them a little of the history. What's the background? Why are you here so long? What does it mean to you? Those kinds of things, and have that conversation. That would do a lot to building some stuff that probably would never have happened in other situations if we were all just going in the office every day. So I think this is an opportunity to be really creative in bringing our employees together in different ways, even if it's through screen to screen.
Yes. Thank you so much. I think these are all the questions we have, unless we have other questions that you guys would like to share through the chat function or the raise hand function.
While you're thinking about that, there's one thing I wanted to mention. The PRSA people who are on the call, PRSA's employee communication section had a webinar on last week on responding to racial injustice with change and healing. It was so wonderful. They'd done part 2 and was going on at the same time as this was going on, but they've opened it up for everybody in PRSA to see. If you go to their webinars, you'll have to look for it, but it's there. It is a marvelous, marvelous discussion on racism and talking about it internally. So what I would suggest is your FPRA folks can pair with your PRSA folks to share it, to go together. It was so powerful and enlightening. I highly recommend it. When I'm done here, I'm gonna go watch the recorded version of that, the second piece. It was really good. So PRSA, it's called Responding to Racial Injustice with Change and Healing, and it was put on by the employee communication section of PRSA.
Yes.
Very powerful.
We have so many tools to share after this. Thank you so much for sharing that too. And I think we got one last question. If you would like to address this as well. Any tips for responding in a more timely manner for big organizations?
Well, the problem in big organizations is you've got a lot of people who want to touch things and sign off on them. And so you can build, one of the most important ways to fix that is to build a lot of trust with your leadership team one-on-one, so that they know they can trust you to say what needs to be said without crossing a line, so that they can say, just go do it. Otherwise, you're stuck oftentimes with legal or finance or HR wanting to wordsmith everything, and that causes the delay. And it'll drive us all to drink. But it's I think, a matter of building your personal credibility with those individuals so that they know they can trust you to go say what you're going to say in a way that needs to be said without stepping in it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All I can say on that one.
Oh, we just had a raised hand. Okay, so we have one last question. The question is, while this might be more of a legal question, how about communicating with employees who refuse to come back in person to work due to COVID-19?
I think in many ways that is more of a legal question. There's a legal part to that question. So I think you have to look at what the law says. And I've sat in on some webinars from some law firms that are talking about this. And there's a lot of detail on what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. I think that our responsibility is the internal communicators is to make sure that their colleagues are treating them in a way that is respectful and supportive, because we don't know everybody's situation. They could be home with elderly parents. They could have an ill child. And we just don't want the atmosphere in the organization to be punitive back at them. So I think we have to set the tone that it's everybody's choice. We will work with everybody to do what's best in their best interest, while also keeping the best interest of the organization as a whole in our viewfinder. So that's one that I would really keep an ear to the ground in those areas where that may occur, when legal starts gunning into that and somebody's saying, I'm not coming back for that reason. I think you really need to think about that, because then some people will be coming back and they'll say, well, I'm here and I'm risking it and Susie's not, and that's not fair. And then you start getting that push and pull. So we need to do some of that work. This is why I went back and got my degree, my master's degree in organization behavior. And my children have always said, when people ask them what I do, I'm like, well, we're like therapists for organizations. You come down to, sometimes you have to like physically walk into that space and help them understand and see through each other's eyes what people are dealing with, and holding them to the values of the organization of how we talk to each other, how we respect each other, how we care for each other, and that different people are going to make different decisions along the way.
That is so true.
Hard. It's hard.
It is. It's never easy.
No.
Okay. Last question. What is your advice for communicating with employees who are furloughed?
They're still employees. It's like, in my mind, it would be like communicating with people who have retired. You want to have as much communication as possible with furloughed employees. Now, if you've got a union, sometimes there are some legal issues with union pieces, but if you make it available to them and let them choose to access it or not, you can get around that. I'm not legal. I, play one on TV, but I'm but I would be communicating as frequently with furloughed employees as anybody else, maybe even more. You want, particularly, if you think about it, 6 months ago, unemployment rate was 3%. And now it's not going to be 3%, but it may be again. And if these are valued employees, you want them coming back. You want them as part of your team. So you want to stay as close as possible.
Yes, the connection is more important than ever, because you got to keep that connection. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. I think these are all the questions we have. Yes.
You want to talk some more? There's my contact information. So those of you who wanted to know about the data, there you can get there. If you want to talk more about any of this, I'm happy to do that. Take care of your employees. They are your strongest piece for your organization. They are the ones who will make and break it, and we need to hold them close.
Yeah.
So be good, stay safe, stay well.
Thank you, Stacey. I think it's like you said, it's like internal communication, and it should be at the forefront of all we do, not just during a crisis, but all the time. So we really appreciate everything. And thank you everyone for tuning in. For those of you who joined us last, thank you for your patience as we walk through things. And if you haven't heard, the proceeds from our event are going to go to New Image Youth Center, who helps kids K through 12 who are at risk in the Paramore community. So thank you all for supporting us. We hope you found this alternative for our media mashup helpful since we couldn't meet in person. And this was the last webinar for the month. And stay tuned to PRSA Orlando and FPRA Orlando's social media channels for some media tips that we're going to continue to share. Again, thank you so much, Stacey, for being here. And like I said before, the webinar and the presentation is going to be available for everyone, so you can refresh your memory on this great content. And take care, everyone, and stay safe.